Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I want to do something a little different than what I normally do. I want to do a bit of a rant video, a bit of a discussion topic video. I wanted to talk about Overwatch League organizations. A handful in particular, who I will definitely mention their names, that I think are awful organizations in terms of what they are doing to their players and to their fans and to the team itself. And things that they are doing that just to me scream a money-grabbing move, and organizations that care less about finding success in the Overwatch League and more about finding profit in the Overwatch League, and I really am not okay with it. I don't like it, and it rubs me the wrong way to see. And this is obviously not a problem that's exclusive to esports. It's a problem that you see in every major sport, especially when you just have, hey, I'm a guy who grew up a fan of the Detroit Lions, let's say, as an example, right? I grew up a fan of the Detroit Lions. I really like the Detroit Lions. They have I have a lot of money. The team's for sale. I'm going to buy this team. The Detroit Lions are really popular. They're really marketable. They're really profitable. I'm going to buy this team, and I'm going to get my investment back real quickly because it's the Detroit Lions, and people like the Detroit Lions. And then this individual buys the Detroit Lions, drives them to the ground, and the team is bad, but eventually, he makes his money back because people who are fans of the city and fans of the sport are going to these games. And people from out of city are saying, hey, my team's going to Detroit. The tickets are really cheap. I'll fly to Detroit for a game. That's got to be pretty cool. I want to see that stadium in person. Now, this is purely an example. This is not something that I'm using an example because it happened in the past. It may have. I don't have the knowledge of the history of the Detroit Lions. But that's the type of thing that we're seeing with Overwatch League teams, right? You have teams who are saying like, hey, I can buy a team to represent my city or my region or whatever, my country, my state. I can buy a team that will represent this whole area, and I can just make money off of it because people are going to want to come visit and come see my team. Yeah, I'll do that. That sounds like a really good investment. I don't care about winning. I just want the money. And we see it too often. Three organizations come to my mind in particular about teams and organizations that I think are the most guilty of that. And it's the Boston Uprising, the Washington Justice, and the Vancouver Titans. The Vancouver Titans are a weird one because I know a lot of people are going to say, the Vancouver Titans last season bought the Runaway roster, right? They signed the entire Runaway roster, plus Repel, from Element Mystic. They signed this entire roster. They were second... They were grand finals runners-up. They had the best record in the regular season of any team. How can you sit here and look at this team and say that they are an organization that doesn't care about winning? Well, look at what happened in 2020. It became clear that they didn't care about providing resources for the team to win. They just wanted to do the bare minimum to get a good team, right? They just happened to have money and were able to buy a bunch of really good players, spend money to get a bunch of really good players from Korea, and then just sat back and said, well, now our job is done. We buy them a house in LA, we put them there, and they go on stage and they win games, and who cares? They didn't really put any resources into the team, right? Now, maybe in 2019, they were way, way, way better with their players. Maybe they treated their players better. Maybe they put a lot more effort and more time and more overall just resources into their players, right? It's very possible. It's very possible that back in, 2019, they really cared. And then in 2020, things changed. There was obviously that report from a few months ago now by Richard Lewis about how the Vancouver Titans, they didn't give them, they didn't hire a translator for the Vancouver Titans players. They were basically living in dorms in Vancouver. They didn't try to market them to the Korean population within Canada, within Vancouver in particular. It was very clear that they didn't really care about winning. They cared about being marketable and profitable in Vancouver. But clearly they were like, we're going to do it to the broad audience instead of this very specific audience who we can market them to, who they can integrate with, which that audience could then help integrate this team into the wider Vancouver audience. But that's too much work. That's too much time. That's not an instant profit for me, right? LA is a great place to put this team, right? Because there's other Overwatch League teams, right? There's other groups and communities there. There's a huge Korean community in LA. Obviously, there's Koreatown in LA. So it's not that big of a deal when the team is in LA. It's easy to have the team in LA and have the team kind of integrate well because they know a bunch of the players there, right? They're at the Blizzard Arena, right? They're playing alongside all of these other Korean players, right? You have a community there, right? The second that they pulled the Vancouver Titans out of this community, the second that they pulled the Vancouver Titans players away from LA, where there was all these other esports players and Overwatch League talent and a large Korean population, they put them into another city, which also had a large Korean population, but didn't have the esports players. They basically just kind of stuck them up there and said, you're there now, and we're not going to give you the resources, right? And there's a very clear problem that was there between the Vancouver Titans players and organization. And at the end of the day, they were like, okay, well, the players want to go to Korea during COVID because the players are from Korea, and so they want to go home where it's safe. And you know what? They're playing on a schedule that doesn't really work for us. The fans of, the Vancouver fans aren't going to be able to watch. Our organization isn't going to be able to watch because it's up too late. So who cares? Get rid of them. We'll bring in a bunch of Western people and bring them back, and they can all speak English, and we can integrate them well into Vancouver, and it's fine. It's not a big deal. Now, maybe that isn't true, right? Richard Lewis had this big report on it. I tend to believe it because there were other reports that were similar from other people, though they weren't as large. So it's very obvious to me, like if you look, right, there's obvious things about these reports that come from a number of places. One of them is Richard Lewis, but there's other places and other rumors and leaks that have come out. But Richard Lewis had the most in-depth report on it. I'll link it in the description if you want to read it. But we see that these organizations, they don't put in the resources that show that they care about their players, right? They bring in people who maybe are incompetent to run the organization, or they blame every single thing on someone that runs the organization and fire them and are consistently in flux. They never have a stable leadership structure, so the players aren't getting the resources they need. The people who are supposed to manage things aren't given appropriate funds, aren't given enough money to be able to actually just get a team ready to just be competitive. And it's very clear problems and issues that plague a number of these teams. There are obvious teams that have had struggles in the past that have made major steps to improve. The Shanghai Dragons in 2018 didn't win a single match. The Shanghai Dragons in 2019 won Stage 3 and just missed out on the playoffs. The Shanghai Dragons in 2020 are arguably the best team in the Overwatch League. That is an organization that was struggling, saw that they were struggling, made appropriate moves to improve, continued to make appropriate moves to improve, and are now looking to be one of the best teams in the league. It's a process. You can't just be a good team usually overnight. It takes time, it takes development, it takes work. And then your team is good, and then your team is profitable and marketable because they're succeeding. Long-term success is always going to be better than short-term success. And there's too many organizations that are prioritizing short-term success than long-term success. They don't want to put in the work to succeed. They just want the success to come to them instantly and instantaneously, and that's all they care about. The Washington Justice have had way too many general managers fired, have not had enough players on their roster, have had too strict things to adhere to when trying to build their roster, and they've struggled. They struggled in 2019. They found one meta that worked for them, and that was it. They've struggled in 2020. They found one meta that worked for them, and that was it. And it was this most recent one with the Genji. They're finding some success now, but overall, they're not finding a ton of success. The Vancouver Titans, they had a really good roster. They didn't think that roster was marketable enough. They wanted an excuse to get rid of all these players. They sent them back to Korea and used that as an excuse to just dump them all off and go for a Western, more marketable audience and a roster that was better for what they wanted to do with the team, which was instantly make profit among the people who are more likely going to go to an event like this. Though, not all of them, but some of them. It's a major, major, major flaw of so many of these organizations where they just say, we want to make money now. We want to have success now by putting in the least amount of effort, by putting in the least amount of resources, and then we can do whatever we want. Boston is an organization where I feel like what they do is they try to take some players that are not very good or that could be good, that need a lot of work, right? Build them up until people are interested in them and then ship them away, right? Fusions was almost traded away last season. The trade fell through. He stuck around, and I think Fusions is one of the best players on this team. I don't think he's going to be on the Boston Uprising next season. I think someone is going to try to get him, and the Boston Uprising are going to trade him, right? When it comes to Myeonbong, right, the report is Huck was like, oh, this Myeonbong guy is really good. I'm not even going to trial him. Before any team can even get the chance to trial him, I'm going to give him an Overwatch League contract offer right away. So we can secure him, have a good player, and then we can, if we're successful, Myeonbong is a big part of it. If we're not successful, trade him away and get more money out of him and sign 2 players in addition or sign another player and start all over again. It seems to me that these organizations clearly don't care about their teams, about how their team's success is measured. And look, I don't have any inside sources. I don't know what's going on inside. I have no idea. I can't look here and say I know exactly what's going on. And that is where I look at these teams and I say from the outside, it looks like these are organizations that don't really care about their teams. They don't care about how their players succeed. They don't care about the success of their players. They want to put as little money as possible into their teams and hope that it works. And one of the things in particular that I think is really frustrating is there's so many trends that you see. The organizations that are at the bottom, as I mentioned, they're not owned by esports organizations. They're owned by just random millionaires who want money, and they don't care. They're businessmen who want money. Maybe they have a history with sports. Maybe they don't. But they're not in this to succeed. They're in it to make money. So they don't care if their team does well. They just care if their team is profitable and their team makes money. You can see that a lot of time in the roster construction. Washington, Boston, Vancouver, the 3 of them have the least amount of players on their roster in the league. Washington has 7, which is really only 6 because Losach isn't with the team. Vancouver only has 7. Boston, I believe, has 9. They have 8, but they really only have 7 because Axiom isn't with the team. Like, they don't have any players. No team that has done well, with the exception of the London Spitfire in 2018, have had a small roster, and even the Spitfire were not very good for most of the later half of the season when they got rid of most of their players. They just got lucky and hit a meta that really worked for them. Right? They weren't consistently good. They were good when it mattered most. Right? Boston has not been that way. Vancouver has not been that way. And the Justice have not been that way. Because they're not putting in the money and the resources to get players, to have depth at their roster, to foster competition and foster growth among their players, because they don't care. They want to make money, dump all their players, ditch all their players, and then move on to the next group of players that they can find and raise up as well. And I'm not going to sit here and say that there are people within these organizations that don't care. Obviously, there are people who are in charge of these teams, coaches that care, managers that care. The people who run day-to-day operations, some of them care. Right? And some of them may not be very good at their job and genuinely care. Huck, I feel bad about like bashing on Huck earlier. Huck is someone who may genuinely care about the Boston Uprising, and he may genuinely care about making this team good, and he's just maybe not that good at his job. He found some success in 2018, but hasn't really found much success since. The Boston Uprising haven't been a very good team. It's difficult to say for sure what's going on. I don't know how these teams operate internally. You make moves, you make decisions that you think work out, they don't. Maybe you have the best intentions with them and it doesn't work out. Maybe you have these people like Huck who are just, they're so limited in what they can do. They have people above them, they have bosses who are telling them, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. If you do that, we're only going to give you so much, and they just try and they fail and they fall short. It's very possible that that's what's happening, and it's really sad to see because there's players on these teams that are really good, that show a lot of promise, that just aren't given the resources they need to succeed, right? Boston's coaching staff has been a little shaky. The players haven't been given the best pieces, and there's not a lot of depth. You're forcing players like Jerry and Colorhex to play all 17 of the damage heroes, which is a lot to ask. The Justice, the same thing. You have 2 damage players. Like, how are those 2 alone going to play all 17 damage heroes on the roster? Vancouver Titans, they ditched their old roster and brought in a new roster really quickly, so the players aren't playing together, which is partially due to COVID. You're not really a lot you can do about that, right? But they have they have a roster. These players aren't playing together. They're on different pings. They're all over the world. Like, they brought these players in and set them up to fail, and they're making the most out of what they've been given. But it's so difficult for these players to find success, because how can you find success when the organization that you assumed was supporting you isn't supporting you? They're just kind of throwing you into the wild, throwing you into the wolves, and just saying, like, do whatever you can. You're on your own. We're going to sit here and cash in the checks from the performances that you have. And whenever we have homestands again, we're going to just cash in the money from that. And we're just going to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And we're going to do it all over again, because that's what we're here for. I don't like it. It annoys me. I could talk about this topic all day, but I figured I would flip it now to you and ask you your thoughts on the situation. Do you think I'm wrong? Do you have information that proves that I'm wrong? Do you agree with me, disagree with me, whatever it is? I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you want more content like this in the future, consider liking and subscribing. But I'm going to get out of here. Thank you once again. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.